Hey, what's going on? You know who it is. You know what it is. All right, you guys, peep game. All right, so we're a day removed from the controversial Gary Russell Jr. fight, and it is a controversial fight, especially the aftermath of the fight from the newly crowned champion, Mark Magsayo. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm gonna go live, but I wanted to talk about this right quick. You know, Magsayo needs to do the right thing and give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch, because Gary Russell Jr. clearly fought with one arm and he took advantage of it. And at the end of the day, that's cool. But come on, man, you beat a one-handed fighter, literally. And I'm going to talk about the comparisons later on in the stream. But he needs to give Gary Russell Jr. a rematch. And I stand by what I say. Gary Russell Jr. shouldn't have had that fight with one arm. Now, don't come on my channel talking about what somebody else said on their channel about they don't believe it was this. It was some foul play behind Gary Russell Jr. getting into the ring. But at the end of the day, a lot of people don't have the guts to speak on this. Gary Russell Jr. had fought in 2 years. Okay? 2 years. Had a bum shoulder, and you can clearly see it. But now all of a sudden, typical. Gary Russell Jr. takes his loss like a man, says he'll bounce back and say, hey man, I want a rematch. And then dude says, well, it's up to my team. He should have said, yeah, I'll give him a rematch. We'll run it back. I promise you, had that been the other way around, you would hear people making videos. Oh, he needs to give him a rematch. Gary Russell Jr., he beat a one-arm fighter. How many times have you seen this did to our fighters? But like I said before, Gary Russell Jr. ain't been on the good foot when it comes to, people behind the scenes. And you know who I'm talking about. I ain't going to say the dude's name because, people going to protect him and try to play a certain role with a certain individual versus another dude. And like I said before, you giving one dude a pass for doing somebody that looks like him dirty versus somebody that doesn't look like him. You guys can open your mouth when it comes to that. But like I said before, call it right down the middle, man. We all know that Gary Russell been at odds with the powers that be for a long time. It's documented. It's documented. Now let's see if they get him a rematch. Now keep in mind, say what you want to say about Eddie Hearn. He got Anthony Joshua a rematch with, Andy Ruiz. He seemed to have got Anthony Joshua, even though there's no fight date, a rematch with, Uslik. So shouldn't the same be done for Gary Russell Jr.? Or is dude going to be allowed to move on? But Gary Russell Jr. definitely deserves a rematch. But I'll promise you, there ain't going to be people pushing for Gary Russell Jr. to get a rematch. And we all know why that is. No need to say it. It's your boy Town Biz. I'm out.